Hello fellow coffee botherers. In this video I'm reviewing the Gaggia Carezza espresso machine. The Gaggia Carezza is one of Gaggia's lower priced traditional espresso machines. It's about £300 in the UK, about $300 in America, so it's about £200 cheaper than the Gaggia Classic Pro 2023 in the UK, about $300 cheaper in America than the Classic. For the price you just get the machine with this portafilter. This is a pressurised portafilter, meaning that the pressurisation is done in the portafilter, not the basket. And it's a very lightweight, plasticky pressurised portafilter. Not nice at all. Similar to the portafilter you'll get with most of the cheaper pressurised basket machines. But, and the reason I'm now reviewing the Carezza is that it's available with this proper standard basket portafilter. It's also available in the UK at least as a bundle with the proper portafilter and the MD15 grinder for £349, which makes it one of the lowest priced traditional basket setups. So in this overview video I'm going to be looking at using the Carezza with the proper portafilter and the Gaggia MD15. The MD15 out of the box doesn't grind fine enough for standard baskets, but Gaggia Direct supply it with shims in the box. I'll quickly demonstrate shimming now so you can see how simple it is to do as I carry on telling you about the Carezza. It's a very retro looking machine. Wes thinks it's
ugly.
It's true.
It's a very retro looking machine. It's mainly plastic, but it has some really surprising little tricks up its sleeve for such a low cost machine. Well, surprising if you don't know about them, that is. If you know about them, they might not come as such a surprise, like watching Sixth Sense for the second time and realising Let's go through the specs first. It has a 1.3 litre water tank, front accessed, which is handy if you're using your machine under kitchen wall units. It's 28.2 centimetres wide, 32 centimetres tall and 30 centimetres deep. It has a manual shot button, press to start, press to stop. It has a thermometer, kind of. It doesn't really give you a great deal of information, just tells you roughly what range you're in. It has a panarello steam wand, as most of the cheap espresso machines have. A panarello, for those who aren't familiar with them, is a sheath over the steam pipe with an air intake hole to inject air into the milk with the steam. They make frothing milk very easy, but they don't give you much control over texture. But if you remove the panarello, instead of just having a normal steam pipe underneath, it has what is essentially a slim Pro steam wand underneath. That was quite a surprise to me, as I had no idea. It has a stainless steel thermoblock, so it's a thermoblock machine, not a boiler machine, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly too. It has a 300ml capacity drip tray, so not bad for a little machine, and the drip tray cover is held on with a magnet in the drip tray, which is another little surprise. It doesn't seem like much, but I just find it a surprising little feature on a machine like this. There is a cup warmer. It does actually get quite hot, but there's an auto off after 9 minutes. So if you're not using the machine for a while, it won't stay hot for very long. We'll talk about that 9-minute cutoff shortly too. It has automatic pre-infusion, which is another surprising thing, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a sec too. I'll make a couple of espressos with it to demonstrate, one with the included portafilter and then one with the proper portafilter. So let's make coffee. First with the included plastic pressurised portafilter. I'm using the MD15 on a more coarse setting, and for this you wouldn't need to shim the burrs. I'm using a 1:2 ratio, about 14 grams of ground coffee to roughly 30 grams of espresso, and I'm just giving it a light tamp with this proper tamper from Gaggia Espresso, not with the plastic scoop. I'll put a link to this in the description. Very simple, and my face will tell you what I think about it, but that's just pressurised basket espresso. If you currently have a pressurised basket machine and you're happy with the taste, then you'll probably be happy with the taste of the espresso this will produce with the pressurised basket. But most people will be watching this to see how it does with the standard basket portafilter, so let's try that. So this is the Gaggia Espresso portafilter. They're about £30 and you can choose to order it as a bundle with the Carezza or with the Carezza and the MD15. They do a bottomless version too if you want to get into using a naked portafilter. I'm using a finer setting on the MD15 for the standard basket. 1:2 ratio and about 17 grams in the basket this time. As I'm grinding finer, I can fit more in, if you're wondering why I use 14 grams in the pressurised portafilter and 17 grams in this one. And again, my face will tell you what I think. Is it the best espresso I've ever tasted? Maybe not, but it's pretty good from such an entry-level setup. The pressure is limited to around 14 bars, as is usually the case with pressurised basket machines, but to be fair to the Carezza, the Gaggia Classic comes with the same overpressure setting out of the box. The auto pre-infusion is quite a rare thing for such an entry-level machine, although I should point out that it's not low-pressure pre-infusion that you'll find on the Sage or Breville machines, for example. It's a kind of pre-infusion that pumps about 10 ml or so of water into the puck of coffee at full pressure and pauses before continuing, so it's more like pre-wetting than pre-infusion. But still, I think it's a positive thing, as it should have at least some impact on reducing channeling. Now let's steam milk so I can tell you my favourite surprise about the Carezza, although it's not a surprise now, as I told you earlier. It has a panarello steam one, the usual manual frother on entry-level machines, and this is the kind of texture it'll produce with that on. But pull that off, and instead of having the usual standard short pipe that can be used as a fiddly steam wand, they've added a bit to it and rounded it off to turn it into a single tip wand. And it works brilliantly. Actually, it works pretty well with the panarello. The steam power is really nice and consistent, but when you pull that off and the plastic piece and use that as a pro steam wand, it's the best milk steaming experience I've had with any other low-cost espresso machine. I think it's much better than the Grand Gaggia, the Gaggia Viva, the DeLonghi Dedica, the Swan Retro or any of the other cheaper machines. I'd go as far as to say it's on par with the steam wand on the likes of the Bambino, Duotemp Pro and the Barista Express and Express Impress, and that's saying something, as they're the best on the market in my opinion in terms of consistent and forgiving steam delivery that are the best to learn with. And there is a learning curve where milk texturing is concerned. It's so much harder than it looks. The steam ready time is impressive too. I'd say that's similar to the Sage or Breville machines with the original thermocoil. Unlike with the Sage or Breville machines, though, you have to manually cool the thermoblock down by turning off the steam and purging the wand. It doesn't do that automatically like the Barista Express does, for example. So overall, I'm far more impressed with the Carezza than I thought I was going to be, being perfectly honest. I thought it was a dated looking plasticky machine with not much going for it on top of the similar cheaper machines on the market that are normally £100 or so cheaper, but I was wrong. It's not quite the Gaggia Classic, it's not quite up to speed with the Sage or Breville machines, but given the cost, especially the cost as a setup with the proper portafilter and the MD15, I think it's a great budget option. So far, it's the best sub £300 traditional espresso machine I've used with standard baskets. Compared to the usual suspects where cheap espresso machines are concerned, this is a bit more substantial, so it doesn't move around quite as much while you're using it. It's easier to use it with standard baskets than the Dedica and the Swan Retro and the various similar machines, as you can literally just tick a box to have it come with the standard portafilter, and it just feels much higher quality than the Grand Gaggia and the Gaggia Viva. Plus it has some form of pre-infusion, as I mentioned, and while it's possible to get decent milk texture on most of the cheaper machines, this is definitely the best I've used among the cheaper machines where milk texture is concerned. As I said, I think it might even be just about on a par with the Sage or Breville machines, at least in terms of how forgiving it is and how consistent the steam power is. Little quirks to mention, one is the 9-minute auto shutdown. That was another surprise, but not a particularly nice surprise. A surprise... Spoiler alert! It's just the kind of use that these machines are intended for. They're made for people who are going to turn them on, make a couple of coffees and turn them off and go about the day. Having said that though, 9 minutes does seem a bit premature, but I think most people will get used to it, and it does heat up really quickly anyway. The other is the auto purge on warm up. This seems like a negative at first glance, but actually I think it's a positive from the perspective of anyone using it how it's designed to be used, meaning to turn it on, make a coffee or two and then walk off and let it turn itself off. If this is how it's been used, then this auto purge is great. If you get into the habit of making sure the portafilter is locked in and your cup is on the drip tray, then it means that the machine automatically heats up the brew path, the group, the portafilter and the cup before you use it. It's good practice to do this with any espresso machine. With most machines you'd have to do it manually, but the Carezza does it automatically. The small water tank is another thing to mention. It's about 1.3 litres. The initial purge is about 100 ml and you'll use some water manually cooling it down after steaming milk. So that 1.3 litres won't go particularly far. But the tank is front accessed. It's really easy to fill, so I don't see that as a big deal. The water tank level is a bit difficult to see. It's a shame they didn't put an LED in to enlighten the tank level, but again, not a huge deal. Just shine your phone torch at it. The thermometer, I actually find it quite a good thing. You can see what range you're in, so I wouldn't say it's pointless, but I think it'd benefit from a dial with some numbers on it, so it's a bit more meaningful. Other than that, I can't think of anything bad to say about it. In a nutshell, I think it's a better option for home barista espresso with standard baskets than most of the cheaper options. I think it's great for the money, especially when you buy it as a package with the MD15 and the standard portafilter. So if you have about £350 to spend and you want a very low cost home barista setup, I think this is the best option I've seen at that price. Do I think you'd be better saving until you can set your sights much higher? Well, no, not really. When I first wanted to get into home espresso before I somehow entered into a parallel universe where I'd managed to turn this into my full-time gig, when I was just toying with the idea of home espresso, people were giving me that kind of advice. I remember someone who really knows her stuff actually, telling me don't bother investing in any setup under £1,000 at a bare minimum or I'd just be disappointed. I remember thinking balls to that, I'll be waiting forever. So I got started on the pennies I could scrape together, 10,000 pennies to be exact. I bought my 2003 Gaggia Classic back when you could still get a used Classic for £100. I paired it with a Harrio Skirton manual grinder. The espresso was rubbish, but so was my palate. I improved my setup and my palate gradually over time and I was never disappointed. So now my home setup is a Sage dual boiler and niche zero, and here in the studio my daily driver is the amazing Gaggia Reale paired with the G10 grinder, and now also the Ferranzato, easy for me to say, F64 Pro. Because 164mm flatter. Ferranzato. And now also the Ferranzato. F***ing hell. And now also the
Fiorenzato
F64 Pro, because 164mm flat burr grinder just isn't enough. And because I entered into a parallel universe, as I said. So my advice is start where you can. Unless you're more patient than I am and you do want to wait until you can afford a higher end setup, completely up to you. So if your budget is around £350, I really don't think you're going to get much better than this as a starting setup. The world's first novel ends mid-sentence, and that has nothing to do with clicking the like button, but thank you very much for watching, and if you love coffee and enjoyed this video, we've got tons of content about how to make better coffee at home to take you from beginner to home barista. We've got reviews and how-tos on the most popular machines. If you like the sound of that, click on my face to subscribe. Tatty Bye. Was that a sheep?